Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Référence Recording. Well, whatever they call it. Enregistrement de référence, the reference recording. And we're talking about today the late Beethoven quartets. Now, not all the Beethoven quartets have reference recordings. Opus 18 doesn't. His first set of 6 quartets. There are Beethoven quartet cycles that might be adjudged a reference recording for the complete cycle. But Opus 18 doesn't get as much attention as the later ones because they're simply not as interesting as Beethoven's later pieces. Now, I know, there are some of you who will say, I love Opus 18. I think they're wonderful. I think they're fabulous. Nobody cares. The judgment of history is that Beethoven's best work in quartet writing, because he was such an evolutionary composer, started with the middle quartets and transmogrified into the late quartets. And those are the ones that everybody regards as worthy of being referential, worthy of having a reference recording. That's just the way it worked. I mean, I'm neither for it nor against it. I'm just telling you the facts as they've happened. So forget Opus 18. The middle quartets, well, they're debatable, but there are some extremely famous versions, and we can get to those in another video at some point. But the late quartets, the late quartets. The late quartets are cosmic, mystical, iconic, the acme of sublimity. You know, they're erhaben, and they say auf Deutsch, sublime. I mean, they're so sublime, you have to do it in multiple languages. They're sublime. They're beneath lime. That's what sublime means, right? It's just unbelievable how revered these pieces are. And I understand why. They are extraordinary works. They are summary works. They're sort of like Bach's entire life's work was a summary work where he took all of music and did everything that he could in every form that he touched, right? Whether it's music for solo violin, whether it's the B minor Mass, whether it's the St. Matthew Passion. It was a grand summation of everything that music could do up to that point. And Beethoven's quartets are like that. In addition to their unbelievable expressive intensity, they do have an almost didactic side. I mean, he's taking the sonata style, that is the dramatic style of sonata forms, and the rhetorical language of music, which is the Baroque forms, variation and fugue, and he's fusing them. He's fusing them into fascinating, individualized whole entities that somehow, at the same time that they're expressing, everything that he thought a melody could express and exploring an unprecedentedly wide range of emotion and passion, they're doing it by engaging in a musical dialogue between differing aspects of musical language. It's really an amazing project, and he did it in the late quartets, which begin with number 12. It's all the quartets over the Serioso quartet, which was Opus 95, and I think that's number 11. Let me just make sure I'm not saying something completely stupid, in addition to the other stupid things I usually say. Let's see. Yes, 11e. And the performances of the late quartets, which have traditionally been the référence in the late quartets, are these. With the Vague Quartet. Now, they did these twice. There's a mono Vague Quartet version and a stereo version. These are the stereo version. And these are the ones that everybody sort of claimed to be the reference. The monos are very highly revered too. And the playing on the mono ones is a little bit better than on these, because Végh himself, Sándor Végh, the amazing violinist, first violinist of this quartet, was a little bit iffy intonationally in spots here, but it didn't matter. This is one of those recordings where technically there may be those that are better polished, but interpretively there are none that are more insightful. And the reason for that is because Végh and his colleagues, shall we say who they were? Can I mispronounce all of their names? Wait a minute. I can probably mispronounce them all. Marvelous. Sándor Végh, Sándor Zsoldy, George Janzer, and Paul Szabo, cello. There they all are. Extraordinary musicians all. But there was, in Végh's work as a conductor and as a soloist, a warmth, a humanity, a spontaneity, a kind of a way of phrasing a melody, of singing out a tune, pouring his heart into it, that was special. And it galvanized all these players. They all shared that same aesthetic. It may be a Hungarian thing because there are Hungarian artists who do that. Ivan Fischer, when he's really on with his orchestra, he does that. And you can hear it in Sándor Végh's iconic reference recordings of the Mozart Divertimenti on Capriccio. Even simple accompanimental figures acquire life. But the point, the Beethoven late quartets that makes these versions so iconic, is how they handle the slow movements, which are huge. I mean, just huge. Let's just, the 12th quartet, the Adagio ma non troppo e molto cantabile, much singing, very songful. It's 15 minutes long, and this is not an unusually slow performance. These are big quartets with big, long patches of slow music that are absolutely cosmic and transcendental in their intent, in their feeling, and they have to be played that way. It's that simple. The 13th quartet has, of course, the cavatina. Now, that's only 7 minutes long, and it precedes the grosse fuga, which is here played as the finale of the 13th quartet. So you get that as well. And there, a little edge to your timbre doesn't hurt because that's built into the music, right? The 14th quartet is one gigantic movement, which they don't even time here. They just say it's one track, one 40-minute long track. But it also has an absolutely beautiful slow movement, the Andante ma non troppo e molto cantabile. Again, that very songful. Beethoven keeps telling us, sing, 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 make the music sing. And then in the 15th quartet, you have the Lydian hymn of thanks from a convalescent to the divinity, which is about as transcendental as it's going to get, isn't it? It's extraordinary. And that's 16 minutes long, a slow movement there. And even in the 16th quartet, the last one, which is really pretty brief, the longest movement is very slow, lento assai e cantante tranquillo. Very slow and singing tranquilly, but singing, always that singing. And so these performances were noteworthy from the day they were issued for that, some might even call it an old world quality that seems to have disappeared. People said that like other orchestras were, like the Juilliard, because they were American, didn't have it. It had nothing to do with American or not American. It was a way of understanding the music. And I have no doubt that if there are groups today that understand the music similarly, they will play similarly. But the point is, it's not like a nationalist thing. Let's not go there. I bring it up only because I keep hearing that foolishness all over the place. No, it's not about that. It's about artistic insight. It's about your training and education in terms of, taking technique and applying it to the higher purpose of musical and formal expression. And it's something this quartet captured quite uniquely. Now, they were recorded on the naive. Well, this is on naive Valois. It was one of these French things. It was there was OVDs, there was Valois. The naive bought them. I have no idea what label this is on now, even if it's still available. It came and went. When they first were issued, I wanted to even tell you who they were when they first were issued. That would be interesting to know. What label was originally recorded for. Let's see if it says. Okay, it was recorded by George Kisselhoff, whatever label he was on. Production, it was Michel Bernstein. OVDs, 1987, according to this. It was. I think these recordings were they earlier than that? In 87, that seems rather late. But no, of course, 1972. That's when they were made. I knew it. Yeah. And OVDs got them in 1987. So, this is one of those recordings that's been kicked around a bit. It may be hard to find, but you should just know about it and keep your eyes and ears open. And you will, of course, tell me if it's available on streaming services or wherever else you can get your hands on it. But it's the stereo versions. Now, in the earlier quartets, people have generally conceded that other versions are more effective. In the Opus 18 quartets, they're livelier performances, more, in the Haydn, Mozart vein. Particularly now that we have period instrument stuff in our ears, we like things that are played a little faster, even though I think slower is probably more authentic. I will say that. I mean, there's a good bit of very fine scholarship that seems to indicate that period instrument people play all this music way too fast and far quicker than players of the day probably could have managed it. Never mind metronome markings and all of that foolishness. We're talking about what people really did. But the Opus 18 quartets here don't get as much love. The middle quartets get quite a bit, but not as much love when you've got other groups like the Juilliards or the Quartetto Italiano or the Alban Berg. I mean, yeah, the major names in quartet life, the Budapest Quartet, and all these groups that were out there back in the day doing Beethoven, which of course everybody did. But for the late quartets, these are the references, and so they remain to this day, for those who know them well, of course. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.